Okay, part three of the GMS Magazine podcast. Go ahead.
I got two bits of side content to talk about.
Yeah.
One is Kickstarters that try to stay relevant when it's clear that they're failing. There's two types of Kickstarters that failed. They take your money and then they ghost everybody. And then everyone comments and comments left and right, talking about this failure and trying to get money back and threatening lawsuits. And nothing ever comes out of it because that's how it works. The second one, which is a strange case, is when the company is being they're communicating on a semi-regular basis, and yet months and months will go by without real progress. Years will go by without real progress. There was a tech that I backed back, I want to say in 2016, and they were putting out updates every 3 or 4 months, and they did that consistently, and people were just like, where's the product? They were like showing images of product lines, manufacturing, showing the chip manufacturer and so forth. They tried to get more money from people to help invest, and most people said no. And then eventually their last update was February of this year, and then that's it. And so it's just like, it's one of those situations where they finally just kind of gave up, but it became very clear within the first year that this thing was never going to deliver. I go, well, why did you continually try to throw lies for 3 or 4 years? And we're seeing it right now with a company, Wild Asset, Levon Rising by Lazy Squire Games. This project on GameFound raised $809,000 from 2,840 backers. It is now 4 years into this campaign. They just did an update just on November 29th. And once again, it's talking about the development, talking about their art, so forth. They posted some suspicious paw prints, and then they have an image, and we'll look at, and they're showcasing one of their characters, the character card. They're showing some of the artwork from the game, and it's a pretty beefy. Now, normally, if you see this post, you're showing, oh, hey, this progress is happening. We like this. This is good, and so forth. Except the fact that this game is over 4 years old, right? If you had $809,000, that money is gone.
Yep.
Like, you cannot have a company of that size fund all that and fund all those assets and not have that money squandered by this point. So, yeah. So suffice to say, most people, the comments now are by a complete majority believing that this is dead, and we are never ever seeing this game. It has been 4 years of just showing the same posts. They're not showing, I haven't seen any posts that, like, everything's been digital. Everything has been digital. At this point, you think you would see a prototype, a Chinese production, here are the games being constructed and so forth. But it has been 4 years of just, here's some more illustrations, here's some more digital work and so forth. But like I said, they've been doing numerous updates. I could scroll through pages and pages of updates until their first one, which was June of 2021.
So it's obviously that is never ever going to happen, because there is something else as well as to what you just said. Regarding a company can't survive with that. Even if it could, let's assume that they're just two people, and they have a day job.
Like my situation.
Correct. For example. And they can manage it. What you could buy for $800,000 4 years ago is not the same thing that you can buy for $800,000 today, or what you will be able to buy for $800,000 in 4 or 5 months' time. So even if they were, for some, astral alignment, able to still continue with the development, There's no way in hell that they would be able to afford to do it without extra money if their calculations were correct. Because everything and anything is going to be between a 15 and a 20% more expensive today than it was 4 years ago. So without any extra funding, I just don't think that they would, they cannot carry the production. I just don't believe they would be able to.
Yeah. Like I said, for me, unfortunately, I've seen this numerous times, but I'm just still amazed at, of course, like they're not commenting, they're not defending, when they're not saying, oh yeah, we understand what's going on, we understand the issues, we're trying, and that's because I suffered through the COVID delays, I suffered through financial complications, and I've been 100% honest when people have said like, is that what happened? I'm like, yeah, that's what happened. I'll be 100% honest. But when you have a company that's just showing artwork, and they're just like, in this update here, we're talking about this, this, and that. And someone's like, we'll be back with news on those pesky West of Wave 1 miniatures, anything else that's going on with Wild Asset and so forth. And I'm just like, where's the rest of it? So that was something that caught my attention recently. On a quick side, we were talking about podcasting. I wanted to bring this up. You said you talked to someone and discovered a RPG podcast talking about a game line.
Yes. There is a tool by Google where you can
Notebook LM.
Yes, where you can feed your own work or anyone else's, and that's the tricky bit, and that will generate FAQs, timelines, summaries to an absolutely outstanding level of accuracy, but also will create a very decent, very realistic sounding podcast, which is about, well, it depends on the length of the document, but it can be anything between 20 minutes and an hour of real conversation between two people.
Yeah.
Very real conversation. I was listening to this podcast this morning, and you can see in places, where the diction is not correct and the sentences become a little bit muddled, but it's incredibly good.
Yeah, it's for me, when you sent me that link, I started hearing it. Within 5 seconds, I knew what it was. And I only knew that because I had discovered it a week ago. I found one guy talking about it on TikTok. I went to the channel and I decided, and I loaded up, and I dumped. I said, I'm curious because I'm naturally tech curious. I threw all my Amethyst books into it and say, give me a podcast. And it took 3 minutes.
Wow.
And I had an 18-minute podcast of two people. The link you sent me is a little hilarious. They only have one episode. It's Miriam and Mark. They don't have names. This person invented these two people's names. I go, I know who they are. I don't know if you can change it. By default, it's a man and a woman talking. And there is banter, there is exasperation, there is elevated and unelevated tones, there's laughter.
They even make jokes.
They even make jokes. And when they did one, and I've been sitting on it going, I can't post this. Or it posted like, this is creepy. And then post it just for people who are curious about how this technology works. But I do have it. It's a 56 and it opens up with these two people. Welcome back for another deep dive. And these two people are talking about Amethyst and so forth. And it seemed perfect. It was not until near the end, after about 15 or so minutes, where they started to make rudimentary mistakes that anybody who read the book would know. So I decided, I wonder if it would handle something a bit more complex. So I loaded Affinity. And Affinity, for those people, is a much more complex, not a more complex system, it's still D&D, but it has a much more complicated presentation. It is three settings that have similar ideas. It's a thick parallel realities, but it doesn't spell it out. It doesn't say, here's a parallel reality, and here are the characters, and they play multiple roles. And within 30 seconds, it had completely lost the plot. It had no it was saying things with charisma, but they weren't saying we didn't really understand it. No, they're saying, well, this is how this is how it is. And I'm like, you are getting everything wrong. You are not getting anything right. Like nothing you're saying is actually true. It is quite fascinating. And then I gave it one of my personal projects, which will never reach site on some of the things, and it's much more. It deals with much more. It's much more graphic, much more like really dark subject matter, things that are more of experimental for me, where I try to push the envelope of my writing. I did that. There was a really raunchy sex scene in Affinity, and then I cut it out because I realized I wanted to see if I could, because my wife loves those. And I gave it to the engineer that was doing my voice book, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna have fun reading this." I'm like, "No, I'm cutting it." He's like, "Oh, damn." I'm like, "Dude, no, this is no." But I wanted to see if I could. But I had one of these stories, and I pumped it in, and it took twice as long. And when the audio finally fired out, it outright lied to get around the content filters. And I'm like, that's actually not true. That doesn't actually happen. And I realized you literally rewrote my story to get around the content filters. You could have just said, there's some disturbing content that we can't talk about, but you actually outright rewrote my story to get around the content filter. It is fast. So if I say, yeah, no, if you hear a podcast and it's two people talking about something,
be suspicious.
Be suspicious. But you're right. If I hadn't known, if I hadn't been playing with Notebook LM last week and you sent me that link, I would have thought it was a legit podcast.
Yeah,
I would have thought it was true.
I was and now in a more slightly more serious note, I was part of me is impressed. I'm not going to lie, because I think the technology is incredibly impressive. Right. But an even bigger part of me is quite scared of this.
I have been more scared from that. Notebook LM worried me more about the future of content creation than anything ChatGPT or Midjourney has put out recently.
Yeah, but I'm going to tell you why it scares me even more. There are things called voice cloners. There is absolutely no reason why in the not too distant future, okay, I could do a podcast on that platform and replace one of the voices with mine and one of the voices with yours, and people wouldn't know that it's not us.
Oh yeah, no, we're already seeing this right now. I did a test run on Kling. Do you know what Kling is?
No.
So, everyone knows what this is where I laugh at people who mock, oh, AI is so bad, AI is bad as this, and then they attack Midjourney. And like, you realize you've been passed. You're angry about something that proportionally happened another generation ago. It's like someone talking about how outraged they are from a recent episode of Dukes of Hazzard. I'm like, you're about 40 years too late. And because I know this conversation because a friend of mine is looking after elderly people, and one guy loves watching the old shows, and like, yeah, it feels. Are you comfortable watching how racist is he? He's like, oh my god, that show is so racist. Like, oh, but it's too late now to be angry about it. But when you go to something like Kling or Runway was supposedly the leader in this, but Kling has more than surpassed it after playing around with their free models. You put in an image and you give it a text, it will give you a photorealistic 10-second animation. And you can give it text and it will lip sync to that audio you give it. And you're right, you can clone an audio, which means not even in a couple of years. I'm saying in probably at this rate, in a few months, you will be able to get anybody to say anything, and it will be very difficult to prove them otherwise.
That's correct.
We're already seeing it. It's already flooding TikTok. It's already flooding Instagram. Like, there are so many. The number of times Joe Rogan has promoted something that he has never once promoted. because people want to get that male angry demographic, and so it's such a if they can get him, and right now, like they're not, I don't know what they're doing with the American election, but they know that there's a Canadian election that's due to happen, like a national election that's going to happen in next year.
Mhm.
So they are dumping propaganda in our social medias now, trying to get our conservative leader in power. He's the next target. They got Trump in. Now they're aiming for a guy named Pierre Poilievre, who's a complete dipshit. And the problem is that people are now finding all of this propaganda generated by, they're like, look, Joe Rogan is endorsing Pierre Poilievre. Like, no, he hasn't. He never has. But they have video of him saying it now. But yeah,
Yes,
that's terrifying.
and it is going to get considerably worse over the next couple of years. Very, very much
Like
worse.
kids, if you have your own role-playing game and you want somebody, a podcast, to talk about it, it's completely free. It takes you 3 minutes, and you get two people to badly summarize your game. Actually, no, it depends. If your game is very easy to learn, it'll probably be able to tell it pretty easily. I just love the fact that this podcast is being presented as legitimate.
Well, the thing is, it's probably going to get even worse, because I can imagine the following situation where you can feed it audio. So let's say that you record your mates, you're playing, and you record a 3 hours long gaming session, which is not fit for broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
And you feed that audio to this platform, and it can depurate that and make a actual play podcast based on what you played.
Yeah,
I can see that happening.
Yeah.
Very, very soon, very, very often. So it is very scary. So I think the lesson that we need to take out of this is, don't trust what you hear unless you can go to the source and ask them if they truly said what you heard them saying. So if you hear me say anything anywhere, ask me before you believe what you're hearing.
Yeah.
So anyway, we have 7 minutes left. Can you do a review in 7 minutes?
Oh, yes, I can.
Then let's go to part 4 of today's podcast.